Hi, I'm Amy, thank you for tuning in. I thought I would do a recommendations video of some of the books that I think you might enjoy during this spooky season. Some are probably books that you've heard me talk about before, hopefully there'll be some new recommendations for you as well. I've tried to do a mixture of genres and audiences, but obviously because YA is my real passion, I tend to skew in that direction. So to start with, some books that I've definitely talked about in the past, but they definitely need recommending every spooky season, the Red Eye series. Now, I have got all of them just about on the shelf behind me, but I've chosen a couple of my favourites to talk about with you. Whiteout by Gabriel Dillon is probably one of my Red Eye favourites for lots of reasons. It's about a group of kids who go on a ski holiday, which I used to do. I always like horror that draws on things I'm familiar with. They are on a school trip and they get cut off from civilization by the weather. Their teachers are murdered and they're stuck on a mountain with some scary vampires, and that's sort of how the book starts. It's really tense, really scary, and I loved how Gabriel Dillon built all the suspense and horror in this book. It's great. So next Red Eye recommendation, we have got Frozen Charlotte. It also has a prequel called Charlotte Says. I read them in the order that they came out, but I think you could probably read them in either order and get away with it. This one is by Alex Bell, and it's a story, if you can see it on the front, creepy little dolls. It's based on a true urban myth, which I won't spoil for you, explains in the book, and these creepy little frozen Charlotte dolls who come to life and cause absolute chaos. It's one of those books that I don't often feel horror sort of seeping into my real life, but when I was reading this, I was on holiday and I kept thinking that I saw blurs in the corner of my eyes, so clearly Alex Bell knows what she's doing to give you a really spooky experience. Next up, a book that probably everybody who's into horror has read, but it is worth a recommendation anyway. Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. I also have the sequel, Friendo Lives, which I will be reading this spooky season. But I read this one when it came out, and I'd never read any Adam Caesar books before, and I just absolutely loved it. I thought that he perfectly captured that feeling of Scream, and I know he did last summer, and all those brilliant 90s slasher movies. I think it's hard to capture that in a book, and I think that this book does it brilliantly. The kids in a town are being stalked by a terrifying clown called Friendo. I've always been quite scared of clowns, not so much now, but certainly when I was younger. So this one just ticked every single box for me. I loved it. Very, very well done. Next, we have the really heavy book that I have recommended before, but I'm going to recommend again, Uzumaki. I also recommend picking up any Junji Ito if you've got it lying around, or if you want to pick up something new. I just think that Junji Ito's writing, particularly this one, but I like lots of his others that I've read too. Junji Ito is very good at writing completely unique stories that I've just never come across anything like it. He does retellings of Japanese stories that I am quite familiar with, and then writes his own completely inventive, absolutely wild and terrifying things. I think Uzumaki probably scared me the most. Is about a town that becomes infected with spirals, which is just as weird as it sounds. And I just thought that it was brilliant, creative, and very, very scary. Next up, we have Tag You're Dead by Catherine Foxfield, but I would recommend reading all of her books. You've also got Good Girls Die First, and It's Behind You, all excellent. I'd say that these are more YA horror thrillers where they're very fast-paced, sort of whodunit type books. This one is about a citywide virtual game of tag that kind of goes horribly wrong, and people are competing for something and end up sort of slowly being picked off one by one. Very, very good. Very tense, thrilling, and a quick sort of exciting read if that's what you're looking for this spooky season. Next, we have Cynthia Murphy's latest, Win, Lose, Kill, Die, but I also love Last One to Die. This one has more of a dark academia feel set in a boarding school, and people who are in the running to become head girl end up being murdered. There's a bit of a theme of these books, and they all get murdered. This one is another tense YA horror thriller, very, very compelling reading, and Cynthia's new book is coming out in January, so you've got time to read her other two if you haven't done so already before then. Next up, another book that people will probably have read, but I can't not recommend, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Perfect for fans of podcasts like Serial and True Crime. It's very much murder mystery whodunit, where Pip decides that For a school project, she's going to prove that a young man who was accused of murdering his girlfriend did not do it, and is told through different media, so bits from like interviews and things like that. The whole trilogy is really, really great, but I think that the first book in particular, it just set off this amazing world full of characters that I loved, relationships that I loved. Pip and Ravi are one of my favourite book duos. So if you haven't read this one, or if you're thinking about rereading something fun and dark and creepy and compelling, then I would recommend it. Jumping around a little bit, we now have a middle grade book by Alex Fawkes, Rules for Vampires, illustrated by Sarah Ogilvie, absolutely beautifully, as you can see from the cover. This book is about a young vampire who has to make her first kill and ends up getting embroiled in a problem to do with ghosts. So I love the fact that this book combines two of my favourite creatures, ghosts and vampires. It's really well done, and the sequel comes out this September, so if you enjoyed the first one, you can pick up the second as well. Next we have another popular title, The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, a very intriguing series about a girl who inherits billions, but the catch is that she has to live in a house with the family that she ended up inheriting their fortune basically. And she ends up having to solve all of these puzzles left behind by the eccentric billionaire who left her the fortune. I'm planning to read the third book this spooky season. I really enjoyed the first two. I'd highly recommend them for a gripping YA mystery. Next we have an older series, but one of my favourites, and the Morganville Vampire series. I don't know whether you can see the title with the foil. This one's called Glass Houses. They're all by Rachel Kane. There are absolutely loads of these. I think there are 15. So if you enjoyed the first one, it's one of those where you can just absolutely blitz through a brilliant series. It's about a main character who goes to stay in a university town to study, and she realises that vampires rule the town and she can't leave once she has entered. I think that, again, this is one where the relationships and the characters are just amazing. I liked the take on vampires in this book, so I'd highly recommend this series if you haven't tried them already. Next we have another popular one, Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is a trilogy, and then there's another standalone and another book coming out in the same world with the same characters this December. This arc is the Truly Devious mystery, where a girl goes to an exclusive school planning to solve a murder that has thwarted detectives and police for decades. It's really good. I like the fact that the mystery unfolds over 3 books. The characters and the atmosphere are really well written, and I love the mystery too. So definitely a new favourite that I've discovered lately. I don't think I can now get through a spooky season without reading Autumn Crow, Karen Chaney's debut. It is short stories, and it is also a very short book, so if you're looking to add something to one of the readathons, lots of which are happening in October, this is a really great choice. I love the fact that the stories are quite different in tone. Some of them have a slasher feel, some are quite funny, some are really dark, and I just absolutely inhaled this one last Halloween, and I think if I can squeeze it in, I'm going to try and reread it this year as well. Next, I couldn't lay my hands on City of Ghosts, so you've got Bridge of Souls instead, but I definitely recommend the Cassidy Blake books as sort of an upper middle grade teen read. They are very creepy, atmospheric books set in really cool cities around the world. This is the third book set in New Orleans, but the others are set in Edinburgh and then Paris. And it's about a girl whose parents hunt ghosts, and she is also friends with and sort of tied to a ghost as well, and they end up getting pulled into all kinds of spooky mysteries. So probably one of my favourite series of all time, this one. Next we have The Last Girl by Goldie Mordowski. I've got Lord of the Fly Fest, her next book, on my TBR for this month, so I'll be reading that, but I really enjoyed The Last Girl. If you're a fan of slashers like Adam Caesar's book, it's very referential of horror movies. It's about a girl who joins a horror movie club, and of course then the real horror starts unfolding too. I read this one when it came out, had loads of fun with it, and I think Goldie Mordowski now is one of those insta-buy authors for me, hence pre-ordering Lord of the Fly Fest that just came out too. So that's another really good choice for this season. One of my all-time favourites that I've mentioned a lot but I can't not mention is Anna Dressed in Blood. It also has a sequel in the duology Girl of Nightmares, both by Kendara Blake, both exceedingly creepy, perfect for fans of things like Supernatural.
Good.
Although as far as I know this predated it or came out around at a similar time. Anna is a sort of very well-known ghost. A young ghost hunter goes to kill her, and they end up forming a relationship and a friendship, and it's very scary. I think as you start to peel back the layers of Anna's story and get to know the main character and the friends that he makes in this new place, it's just brilliant, very well done. It was Kendara Blake's debut, and of course she's written loads of brilliant books since, but I think this is still one of my favourites of hers. Next we have another middle grade series. It's the Fright Watch series. There are other books out if you're interested, but this is the first one, The Stitches. I really like these books because they have that feel of the old school kind of Goosebumps point horror books, where a couple of kids realise there is a problem in their community and a mystery unravelling, and they try to solve it. And actually it's quite scary in places. It's perfect for teens who kind of want to push the boundaries of scares, and also for adults who want those kind of fun light scares. It also deals with some difficult subjects like grief really beautifully, and the main character has suffered a loss. And I just think that if you're wanting a kind of really well-rounded read that'll make you think about difficult things, but also give you a fun scare, this is a really good pick. Next we have Wicked Little Deeds by Kat Ellis. I'm also a really big fan of Harrow Lake. I do need to read Kat's other books that she wrote before those, but those are two particular favourites. This is Kat's latest, which came out last year I think, and it is one of those that is set in a very atmospheric town with sort of a creepy history, and the main character has a murder case that starts to come very close to her. And there's also this local myth about a ghost of a girl called Dead-Eyed Sadie. And I like the fact that Kat's books make you question whether you're dealing with something supernatural or something that can be explained in real terms, but it's very good. And I liked trying to puzzle out what I was dealing with. Next, I've just chosen one point horror to recommend, but there are quite a few Halloweeny ones. Look how shiny this one is. And this is one of the special foil editions of Trick or Treat by Richie Tankersley-Cusick. There are also some other Halloween themed ones like Halloween Night, but this one I remember being a particular favourite. I'm tempted to try and reread it over spooky season. It says, it's Halloween, a time for trick and treats, a day when anything can happen. The first time Martha sees the house, she knows it's evil, somewhere so cold and sinister couldn't be anything else. So she's not surprised to find that someone was murdered in it. Not surprised, just scared out of her mind. She's also sure someone's watching her, following her, making creepy phone calls. Martha's pretty certain that this Halloween is going to be the scariest of her life and possibly her last. I love the fact that this ticks off a lot of the familiar point horror and horror tropes in general. It's a really fun one, and I definitely recommend picking it up. Next we have Hexed, about a girl who gets witchy powers when she returns back to the island that her family is from. And this, I really like it because although it deals with kind of witchcraft, which I think I've often read in historical context, is modern, and her witch powers are sort of tied to menstruation, and she ends up using her powers to deal with the patriarchy and take down things and people that she believes are unjust. And it's very funny, frank and bold, this book, and the title, the tagline, "Don't get mad, get powers," pretty much sums it up. I loved this one. There is also a sequel that's come out, so if you're interested you can read both books right now. Next, also on the vampire theme, we have the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This is basically a placeholder to say read any Grady Hendrix book, and if you like horror, particularly adult horror that's quite dark and boundary pushing, I think you'll have a good time. This one in particular is about a book club who start to think that somebody in the community is a vampire. Some of the members do anyway. It's very dark. I liked the sort of southern setting, and I liked the way this comes up kind of with its own take on vampires. I'm trying to word it carefully so as not to spoil anything, but I did really enjoy reading this one and all of Grady Hendrix's that I've read. Next, I only have a proof of this because Big Bad Me comes out in October. It doesn't say the date on it. Definitely, I think it's mid-October, this one. I really enjoyed this werewolf book where one of the main characters is a werewolf and also gets mixed up with vampires, and I like it when different supernatural creatures get to meet. It's also a mystery where people are being killed and disappearing, and it's a mystery of a missing mother too. So lots going on, great characters. I'd really recommend giving this one a pre-order. Next we have tense psychological YA thriller with lots of romance. Every Line of You by Naomi Gibson is about a girl who creates an AI after suffering a terrible personal tragedy to be her friend, but he ends up becoming much more, and between them they form this sort of Bonnie and Clyde relationship where they're willing to do anything for each other. It's very thought-provoking about what AI could potentially be in the future. Hopefully not this, because it's terrifying. But it's also just this book about a girl kind of figuring herself out and dealing with loss. Absolutely brilliant, lots to it, lots to think about, and I'd really recommend this one. Naomi does have another book coming out next year, which I'm really looking forward to reading, called Game Over Girl. That sounds really fun too. Next we have a short story anthology, Vampires Never Get Old, Tales with Fresh Bite. I love the fact that this is a modern anthology about vampires, so it's got stories that are very feminist, stories, my particular favourites by Rebecca Roanhorse. I'm going to have to check the title of it. The Boys from Blood River. So book stories like that, it feels very referential of The Lost Boys, which is one of my favourite films. And I just thought that this is very well edited and put together by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker, but the calibre of authors included, including V. Schwab, whose story was turned into the first Kill series on Netflix. It's just really, really good all around. Quite a short read, but lots of great stories in there. Another short Fanged read is Fangs by Sarah Anderson. Really short, really fun story, and look how beautiful it is with the sprayed edges. About a relationship between a werewolf and a vampire, and it feels very cozy. It has that kind of Heartstopper feel to it, where it feels quite sweet and innocent, although there is that dark edge to it of what could happen if you're in a relationship with a vampire or a werewolf. So really fun, really quick. I just sat and read this in one sitting, so if you're looking for something like that for a readathon or in general, this is really great. And last but not least, we have Dead Lucky by Andrina Cordani. This is a really fun thriller about a YouTuber who is murdered on screen. It's not YouTube, it's some version of, an online streamer is murdered on screen. And the other friends that sort of see it happen live are worried that he held a lot of their secrets. So what are going to happen to their secrets and what is going to happen to them? It's just this really fast-paced thriller that will keep you guessing. There's plenty of kind of clues and red herrings, so it's just a really, really fun one to solve. Andrina also wrote The Girl Who, which is a YA thriller that's quite dark and deals with a girl who suffered a tragedy and became the girl, known as the girl who'd lost some members of her family, but is also a really, really well done YA thriller. So that is it for this time. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of those books, or if you recommend any that you think I would like. There are loads of other books I could recommend, so if you're looking for something specific, let me know as well and I'll see what I can do. As always, I really appreciate likes, comments and subscribes. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you especially to the people who've stayed with me on this YouTube journey. I'm really enjoying talking about spooky books with people. I've got lots of fun things planned for spooky season, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching.